And without further ado, we're on to the topic of the hour. Pairing organic and no-till practices has been gaining a lot of interest in recent years. I learned about Yichao's work at Rodale from some videos that they published or produced this last summer, and I'm really glad that he's here to share with us. So without further ado, please let's give a warm remote welcome to Yichao Rui. Take it away, Yichao.
Oh, thank you, Stefan. Let me first share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks very good. Thanks.
Okay, great. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. My name is Yichao Rui. I'm a soil scientist at Rodale Institute. And also I currently serve as the research director of the farming systems trial at Rodale Institute. So before we get started, let me first spend a minute to introduce Rodale Institute. So many of you may have heard of Rodale before. Started in 1987. We are the birthplace of organic agriculture in the United States. Our headquarters is located in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, but we also have 3 regional resource centers in Iowa, California, and Georgia. And when you hear about Rodale Institute, you always think of organic agriculture, right? But actually, now we are trying to expand the principle of organic to regenerative organic agriculture. So regenerative organic agriculture not only sustains resources, but also improves them so as to build a foundation for long-term food production. So there are some principles of regenerative organic agriculture, including eliminating chemicals, diversifying crop rotations, maximizing living cover using cover crops and perennials, and also using natural fertilizers such as compost and green manure. Also, last but not least, reducing tillage and soil disturbance. So that comes to the question, why no-till, or why reducing tillage in agriculture systems? I think now everybody knows that because frequent tillage deteriorates soil quality and increases the risk of erosion. So I guess there's a consensus among both conventional and organic farmers that we need to reduce our tillage, both frequency and intensity, to protect soil quality and soil health. So actually, no-till or reducing tillage has been achieved through different pathways in conventional and organic agriculture. In conventional, no-till is usually achieved by using chemicals, herbicides, especially Roundup. So you use, whether you use cover crops or not, you can use Roundup to burn down the cover crops or get rid of all other weeds. But in organic, because organic farmers cannot spray, so they have to use other ways to achieve no-till. Usually in this circumstance, cover crops are used to produce a weed barrier in the growing season. Then we need innovative tools such as the roller-crimper to effectively terminate the cover crops and to form a mulch to suppress weeds in the growing season. So the cover crop-based organic no-till systems have been tested out or tried in different locations. And starting from early 2000, what we have been doing here at Rodale Institute is to promote a roller-crimper-based organic no-till system utilizing the power of cover crops and also tools to terminate the cover crops. So what we do first is to plant annual cover crop in a fall. For example, here it's a cereal rye cover crop planted in September last year. And the next spring, we terminate the cover crops mechanically and plant cash crops into the residues of cover crops. And then the cover crop residues will become a weed suppressing mulch in the growing season. So this approach has been shown successful in many locations, but there can be some challenges. And I'll talk about those things. And I want to show you some long-term results from the farming systems trial, which was started in 1981, consisting of conventional organic legume and organic manure, these three systems. And in 2008, all these three systems were divided into till and no-till. So it's been 12 years since these three long-term systems have been divided into till and no-till. So we can see that the soil carbon stock has been significantly different among the three systems. The conventional system has the lowest soil carbon compared to both organic legume and organic manure system. That's not surprising. But we found more interesting that in the conventional systems, the chemical-based simplified conventional system, whether you adopt a no-till or cover cropping alone, which is the conservation conventional system here, it's not going to help with increasing soil carbon in a conventional system. But adopting no-till in organic, especially the organic manure system, can further increase soil carbon. So that shows that the organic no-till is really a promising strategy and system to further improve soil health. So that's what we consider the spectrum of agriculture systems. If you are moving from conventional to conservation conventional, which means adding no-till to conventional, obviously you are moving more towards more regenerative. But if you can move even further to organic and regenerative organic no-till, then you're really moving towards more regenerative. So the question is, how to achieve organic no-till, right? We know the principle, we know the benefits, but the question is very practical. How can we achieve organic no-till? Some of you may ask, well, I come from very north. I only have a short window for cover crop planting. So what quantity of cover crop biomass will be needed to control weeds effectively in the next season? Or things like, what if I don't have access to a roller-crimper? Well, other tools work equally well. For example, the mowers. Can I use a mower to terminate the cover crop and suppress weeds? And no-till compromise plant nutrient uptake, right? Because when you till the soil, although it's not good for aggregate stability, it's not good for preventing from runoff, but you can stimulate nutrient mineralization and provide some more available nitrogen. So no-till compromise plant nutrient uptake. So these are the things we want to ask and answer so as to help farmers to better adopt these technology and systems. So this is what I'm talking about today. The project is entitled Innovations in Cover Crop Based Organic No-till System to Improve Soil Health and Nutrient Management. It's USDA NRCS Conservation and Innovation Grant, SIG, and it's a collaboration between three institutions, including University of Wisconsin-Madison, Rodale Institute, and Iowa State, also supported by industrial partners, including Dawn Equipment, Red Dragon, and Bird Lee Seed. And we are conducting field-based research in 9 locations in these 3 states across 3 seasons and 2 crops, corn and soybean. But today, for the sake of time, I'll just focus on soybean systems. So the objectives of this project are really to test the effectiveness of various organic no-till systems in terminating cover crops, controlling weeds, supplying nutrients, and maintaining yield of cash crops, and also to determine the impacts of these management systems on soil health. So the field trials have been conducted at Rodale since 2019. So far we have 2 years data to share with you. So as I just mentioned, cover crop cereal rye was planted in fall, and next spring it will be terminated and soybean cash crop will be planted. We are comparing no-till versus tillage treatments. The till treatment is what most organic farmers would do. They plow to terminate the cover crop, and they come back in the growing season to cultivate a couple of times to get rid of the weeds, mostly the in-row weeds. Mostly the between row weeds, because they can't cultivate the in-row where the soybeans are growing. And the no-till treatments include a Rodale roller-crimper, which was manufactured by INJ. You have seen the pictures of the roller-crimper, or you've seen videos or farmers actually using it. And also a Dawn roller manufactured by Dawn Equipment from Illinois is also used. And we also tested a treatment that farmers may find more accessible, mow and tad. We mow the cover crops using a haybine mower and use a tether to spread the residues of the cover crops across the field. And we also tested the 2 different planting dates of rye cover crops, September 15th and October 15th, to see if there are differences in these planting dates in terms of cover crop biomass and weed control. Okay, here are some pictures. The plow and cultivate is what most organic farmers, organic tillage farmers used to do to control weeds and to terminate the cover crop. The Rodale roller-crimper that was first designed by Jeff Moyer, our CEO, in the early 2000s. And you can see it has a chevron-shaped blade, so you can terminate and you can cut the cereal rye every few inches using its weight, 1,800 pounds, and you can further fill with water for extra weight. And the Dawn roller was a modified version of the roller-crimper. It uses hydraulic control to adapt to uneven field conditions, so you can, really can provide maybe better kill. And the mow and tad is in the mow and tad, the haybine mower is used. So we collected data including the cover crop termination, weed control, weed pressure, plant nutrient uptake, yield, and in-season soil health. So you can see here are 2 plots side by side. From the left-hand side is a roller-crimper treatment, where the cereal rye was rolled and crimped, and soybean was planted into these plots underneath the cereal rye cover crops. And on the right-hand side, you can see organic tillage treatment, which is plow and cultivate. And the mow and tad, you can see the haybine mower and the tedder and the cover crop residues on top of the in a field. And here are some drone images of the field and the plots. So you can see over time there will be more soybean growing in the no-till, both no-till and the tilled plots. So let's take a look at some data. So first of all, let's take a look at the rye cover crop biomass. It's important because it's been proposed that you really need a decent amount of cover crop biomass for weed control. Here we can see there's a target biomass proposed by several literature that's about 7,000 pounds per acre. And we can see that in 2019 and 2020, there are considerable annual variation. In 2019, we did not produce enough biomass or to the target level in both early planted and late planted plots. But in 2020, both September planted and October planted plots resulted in a good amount of cover crop biomass, higher than 7,000 pounds per acre. But we will further talk about that. But I think that's because of the interannual weather conditions that caused the differences in the cover crop biomass. If you're from the Mid-Atlantic area, you may remember that 2018, the year 2018 and early 2019 was extremely wet. So that may cause the difficulty for the cover crop biomass to become ideal. And cover crop bounce back. So that's For cover crop bounce back, we're looking at how easily the cover crop would bounce back after termination. So obviously for the plowed and the mowed plots, though they will not bounce back. So we're only looking at down roller and the Rodale roller-crimper. So you can see that the 2 years, in the year 2020, there was a better kill for both planting dates and for both roller-crimpers. There was generally better kill in 2020 than 2019. And the early planted cereal rye was harder to terminate. The September planted cereal rye was harder to terminate in both 2019 and 2020 for both roller-crimpers. And it seems that the down roller, which is the blue bar, it has more effective, it's more effective in terminating the rye cover crops, which is indicated by lower bounce back under the down roller treatment than the Rodale roller treatment. And here are some pictures of 2019 soy emergence. And you can see in 2019, the graph on the right-hand side shows that in the no-till, the roller-crimper treatment, there are not so impressive termination of cover crop. A considerable amount of bounce back coming after the termination. And in the year 2020, these pictures are taken on the same day, but maybe more in the season. We can see that the roller-crimper really delivered good termination and a very good, very effective weed control. And on the left-hand side, the soy, although it looks not as similarly, equally well compared to the roller-crimper treatment, but if you look closely in the row, you can see the soy in the row has considerable amount of weeds coming out of it, right? Especially those grasses, foxtails, those weeds, because they're in a row, they cannot be cultivated. They cannot be, controlled by between row cultivation. So these can be a problem for, organic tillage farmers. So these are what we are seeing in 2020. And then let's take a look at the weed pressure. So in 2019, we can see that the first two bars are the plow and cultivate organic tillage, and the next three groups are the organic no-till, including mow and tad, down roller, and the Rodale roller-crimper. We can see that in 2019, the no-till treatments, the three groups of bars on the right-hand side, they had more weeds, heavier weed pressure than the PC, which is the plow and cultivate. And the weeds are mostly from between the row, which are the gray section in these bars. And remember, we talked about in 2019, the cover crop biomass was not as great as 2020 because of the challenging weather conditions. And because of that, we see the yield in 2019, soybean yield in 2019, were lower in the no-till treatments than the plow and the cultivate treatments. And only in the plow and the cultivate, the organic tillage treatment resulted in achieved the 5-year Berks County average in this area, which is about 45 bushels per acre. And there is no difference, no significant difference between these three no-till systems, mow and tad, down roller, and the roller-crimper. Although there seems to be a difference for the different planting dates. The earlier planting date, the September planting date of cereal rye, had a little bit higher soybean yield and also lower weed pressure than the late planting date. However, in 2020, that's a completely different story. We found that in 2020, the no-till treatments, including the mow and tad, down roller, and the roller-crimper, had considerably significantly lower weed pressure than the plow and cultivate. And that's also translated to the yield. And we found in 2020, the yields are much greater or significantly greater in the no-till treatments than the plow and cultivate. And the plow and cultivate did not achieve the 5-year Berks County average, but the roller crimper, especially the Dawn roller and the Rodale roller, the early planting dates of the two roller treatments achieved the 5-year Berks County average. And also the two roller crimpers had better yields than the mow and tagged. And the early planted, September planted treatment had greater yield than the no-till, than the October planting dates. And if you look at the weeds from between row and inner row, you can see that in the plow and cultivate, the organic tillage treatment, the weeds are mostly in the row. As I mentioned, in 2020, there are a lot of in-row foxtails coming from the soybeans in the row, which you cannot control by cultivation. Okay, so let's take a look at the 2019 and 2020, the 2 years weed pressure together. You can see in 2019, no-till treatments had greater weed pressure than the plow and cultivate. But in 2020, the no-till treatment had lower weed pressure than the plow and cultivate. So that shows there's significant, interannual variation. And the high in-row weed pressure in PC plot, the organic tillage in 2020, that really resulted in declined yield in organic tillage treatment. And here are the pictures at harvest. You can see on the right-hand side, the row and crimp, it did not seem to be very weedy, right? The soybean were good. But in the plow and cultivate treatment, organic tillage plots, you can see a lot of foxtails coming from in the row. And if you look at the relationship between soybean yield and the weed pressure, you can see there's a close relationship between soybean yield and weed pressure. And the relationship is consistent between the 2 years, 2019 and 2020. So that really shows that soybean yield is largely affected by weed pressure. But organic no-till and organic and tillage system, they show completely different responses in different years with different weather conditions. So why are these patterns so different between the 2 years? Why? So let's take a look at the 2 years annual weather variability. So these curves are actually the variation from the long-term average. So these are not the annual or monthly precipitation. These are the variation, the anomaly from the annual average, okay? So the red curves are the season of 2019, including the fall from September of to December of 2018. And then the blue curves are the seasonal variation for the growing season of 2020. So you can see for 2019, there were really extreme precipitation, much more than long-term average in the fall, the year before, and also in the early season. A lot of very wet. It was just difficult to get a tractor in or do any field work at that time. But the blue curves you can see, it's more like the long-term average. So it's more, or more normal precipitation. So that different weather conditions, the unusually wet winter and wet spring for 2019 growing season really affected the cover crop biomass, the weed control for the next season. That's something we really need to look at. So we can see that in 2019, because of the very challenging wet conditions, the raw biomass was really low, But in 2020, we had high raw biomass, right? And that's translated to weed pressure. In 2019, we had overall higher weed pressure especially in the no-till systems. And the tillage system, you can the weeds you can really cultivate to control the weeds between the row. But in the 2020, because we had good amount of raw biomass, cover crop biomass, we had good weed control in the no-till systems. But there's unexpected high weed pressure, the foxtails from in the row that you cannot control for using cultivation in a tillage treatment. So the weed pressure in the tilled plots are really out of control in 2020. And then we found lower yields in the no-till system in 2019, and good yield in 2020 in the no-till system, but low yield in the tilled system in 2020. And then let's take a look at the leaf tissue nutrient content, the plant nutrient uptake. So we can see that similarly in 2019, the no-till had lower nutrient uptake of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But in 2020, no-till had or similar or greater nutrient uptake of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So again, that's really controlled by the interannual weather conditions. And the in-season soil health, so far we have only had the data for 2019 growing season, and the 2020 soil sample has still been analyzed. So we can see that generally there's lower nitrogen in the no-till soils. That's I think that everybody can understand, because when you till the soil, you expose those organic matter preserved in those aggregates. So there will be more available nitrogen in a tilled soil than a no-till soil. So that's not surprising. But labile soil health metrics did not vary across these different treatments. But again, we need more data, different years, and also long-term system effect to make a conclusion about the long-term soil health benefit under these no-till systems. So just a bit of summary, soybean yield really is largely affected by weed pressure. Weed pressure is really the number one determinant factor for soybean yield. So corn is a little bit different. It's more like controlled by both yield and also soil fertility. But for soybean, if we can do whatever we can to get rid of the weed, then we have high chance of getting good yield. And weather condition, interannual weather variation, it's a big challenge for managing weeds for soybean in organic systems. Also, we seem to see that there is better cure with the dawn roller, but also lower weed pressure with the Rodale roller. And also the mow and tag treatments cannot deliver consistent results. So if you want to use mower to provide some mulch to control the weeds, I think the number one thing to think about is to make sure you have very good, very evenly spread of the cover crop residues in the field. And also we need to develop and refine technologies to offer more chemical-free weed control options. For example, here's a study by recently published study from Germany, looking at 20 organic farms. So they compared conventional system, organic tillage system, and an organic no-till system. Here they use the term organic mulch-based cropping system or organic plus. So the organic no-till system is leading in every aspect: microbial biomass, nitrogen leaching, the soil carbon, or the biodiversity, except the yield. And organic tillage system, as I mentioned, it may have resulted in better, more available nitrogen. So usually you have better yield, and because of the cultivation to control weeds. So that again shows for organic no-till system, to control weeds and optimize nutrient management, that's really key to improve yield. So there are some future efforts we can focus on to refine organic no-till system. So for no-till system, if you have weeds coming from between the row, if you don't say if you don't have a decent amount of cover crop biomass produced because of the weather condition, then what we can do, we can come up with the high residue cultivator. The high residue cultivator is a tool that you can cultivate underneath the cover crop residues to a very shallow depth, so as to provide some additional weed control in the no-till system. And for the tillage, organic tillage systems, if you have like the foxtails coming from in the row, right? You cannot reach by the cultivators. What can we do? We can probably use things like the weed pullers to pull these foxtails from the inner rows. So I think the important thing is that you need to keep your options open and monitor the fields, and what you see, then that will determine what you to use to get rid of the weeds and achieve better weed control and good yields. So that's it. I think I want to acknowledge the founder, USDA, NRCS, and our collaborators from UW-Madison and Iowa State University, also the Rodale Research and Farm Operations team, and our industry partners from Dawn Equipment and I&J Manufacturing. So that's for today. Again, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer after the session, or you can send me an email and we can talk about it later. Thank you.
Great, thanks Yichao. We do have some questions in the chat and we've got a good amount of time to get after it, so let's go. Barney and Suzanne kicked things off for us. They asked if you could address the problem of having to wait for the cereal rye cover crop to head out before killing it, and that's become increasingly difficult when we have wet springs, and then followed by droughts like we did this last year. So can you address that, the importance or the problem of having to wait for the rye to mature to head out before killing it without chemicals?
Yeah, that's actually a very practical, realistic thing we need to take into account. And what I've been hearing is that our CEO, Jeff Moyer, he has 40 years experience working with these things. So he can, based on his experience, to determine the timing for termination. I think that's really important. We need to observe in person. So there's no silver bullet answer to that question. I think what I've been seeing is that we really need to, for the cereal rye, we really need to have the pollen to come out to terminate. For example, I'm allergic to the pollens of the cereal rye. So if one day I feel like I walk in the fields or by the fields, I feel like I want to sneeze, that's probably a time we should think about terminating. So let's see in the next few days if we need to we can do the termination. And if you terminate it, as many farmers would know already, if you terminate too early, then they are not maturing enough, then they will regrow. But if you terminate too late, then those cover crop will go to seeds and cause problem of volunteer weeds for the next season. And for that's, I think, also important for when we think about doing multi-species cover crops, the cocktails, right? We always hear good things about the diversity, more diverse cover crops. Yeah, of course there will be some benefits. If you grow different species of the cover crops, then the root exudates from these cover crops will fill in different niches in the soil and provide diverse carbon input for the soil organisms. That's benefit everybody want. But for termination in the no-till systems, that will be a challenge because the different species of cover crop, they will enter the mature stage at different timing. So you really need to think about when is the best time to terminate. That can be a challenge. So that's why in this model system, we still use the single species cover crops for many reasons. I hope that can answer the question.
Okay, thanks. There were a couple questions about the Dawn roller that you used in the study, asking about the design. Did this have the built-in row cleaners, or was it just the design that has the roller behind the planter?
Yeah. So as you can see, the Rodale roller manufactured by INJ, what we do is to mount the roller-crimper in front of the tractor and a monocene planter behind the tractor. So you can do that in one pass. So you roll and crimp in front of your tractor and plant afterwards in one pass. So that's good. That's been pretty well tested here at Rodale and also by collaborators. So and for the Dawn roller, because it's pretty new, it's also new to us. So we use different ways to do it in 2019 and 2020. In 2019, we kind of used the Dawn roller. We remounted the Dawn roller. We terminated the cover crop first with one pass, and then we come back with the planter to plant that with with a second pass. So it was like 2 passes for the Dawn roller treatment. And in 2020, we were working with some industry partners, and we put on I'm not an engineer, so I don't know the details, but we used a one pass system for the Dawn roller. But if you would like to hear more details, I'm sure you can reach to Dawn Equipment, Joe Bassett and Lauren Steinlich. They're very close from Iowa, so I think they will be able to help.
Okay, great. There's a question about how you established the rye the previous fall. Did you do any tillage ahead of the rye planting, or did it a no-till drilling? Can you talk about how the rye was established?
That's a great question. I'm glad that you brought that up because we were talking about organic no-till, right? Organic no-till. But actually, more strictly, we need to name it rotational organic no-till. So for example, in the farming system trial started in 1981, as I mentioned, we divided the 3 systems, including organic and conventional system, into both no-till and tillage, right? In a conventional system, the no-till is completely no-till, Roundup, right? Roundup, complete no-till, using chemicals. But in organic systems, the no-till is rotational no-till. So we no-till to terminate the cover crop, and no-till we control, but in the fall, we still till to establish the cover crop. That's based on the experience of our, our staff here, and also, I believe, collaborators from Iowa State and UW-Madison. So the concern is that if you don't till to establish a cover crop, you're not going to have a good stand. You're not going to have a good amount of biomass. That will cause very challenging conditions for weed control in the next season. You don't want to see that. So fall tillage, or here we used, in this experiment, we used mobile plow. We still used a plow to establish the cover crop. We plow the soil, disc and pack, and create a nice clean and seed bed to ensure a very good stand of the cover crops, because that's the key to have good cover crop amount of biomass, but also a very even field in the May or June next year. So that will be critical for your weed control in the next season, the next growing season. And we also, last year, we also tried different ways to to establish the cover crop, we used mobile plow in comparison with chisel plow and a tool called the Traveler shallow tillage tool. Traveler shallow tillage, it's very shallow, even more shallow than the chisel. So we used the 3 tillage practices to establish the rye and plant the soybean. I can share with you some preliminary result. We found the chisel seems to be acceptable. So it created a little bit, less cover crop biomass than the mobile plow, but it also delivered similar amount of soybean yield in the next season. But again, that's just one season, one side year experiment result. We have to have multiple side years data to make sure that okay, chisel maybe it's also good for our area for establishing cover crop, cereal rye cover crop, and resulting acceptable weed pressure and yield. That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yichao, I was really pleased to see that there was a mowing treatment in this study, because we get a lot of questions, or I've heard a lot of questions from farmers thinking, because that's a piece of equipment maybe they already have and not a roller. And you obviously showed you use this mow and tedder approach. Can you comment on, obviously you didn't do this, but can you comment on what would happen if you maybe used a sickle mower instead of a mow and tedder approach? Or if you could just speak more about why you saw the effects of mowing versus the rolling in your experiment.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the reason we used the mow and tedder treatment is to mimic a situation that the farmers would easy access to the tools and do something themselves if they don't have access to the roller crimpers, right? And what we saw in the 2 years, 2019 and 2020, is that sometime in some plots it worked well. It worked well. And we have 4 replicates. It's a complete randomized design. In some plots or some sections, we can see very good yield and good weed control in the mow and tedder treatment, but it's not very consistent. That's a problem. It's not very consistent. In some locations, you have very poor soybean emergence, and also very much weed pressure from the mow and tedder. It can be very well, but also it can be very bad. So the key is that whether you can spread them very evenly on top of the ground, and not to interfere with soybean emergency and weed control. I think that's very challenging, but it may be possible. It may be possible. So we have to try new ways. So that's what we are seeing now. We have to try new ways to optimize the system. Maybe possible.
Okay, so I'm just going through some more questions through here. You cited a study from, I think, Germany or Central Europe, and that referred to tomatoes. Do you know if that experiment included other crops in a rotation, or was that just on tomato farms in Germany?
That's just for tomato farm. That's a recently published paper. Actually, I saw that study the day before yesterday. So I was very impressed by the way they're looking at the problem. So I included that in this presentation. I think that's generally what we are seeing for the conventional organic tillage and organic no-till systems. Organic no-till, it will provide many benefits compared to conventional and organic tillage system. Organic tillage system, because as I said, you till the soil, you have a chance to get better weed control. Also, you can plow to incorporate those cover crop residues, green manure, for soil fertility, more nitrogen, as we are seeing in this experiment. But essentially, in the long term, you may not have as good soil health as compared to the organic no-till system. However, the no-till system leads every aspect except the yield. Organic no-till system. So what can we achieve or achieve the same amount of yield compared to both conventional and organic tillage system. That's really a challenge. For the soybean, we see the real challenge comes from the weed pressure. And for the corn, we're also doing corn in this project. For the corn, the weed pressure is not that a big problem because the corns can grow very tall and shade out those weeds. But for corn, what we are seeing is that we really need to optimize the nutrient management to provide the nutrient that corn needs at the critical time, because corn, as we know, are luxury nitrogen consumers. They need a lot of nitrogen and nutrients. But again, for different crops, corn or soybean or tomato, there can be different challenges or number one issues. Whether that's what we can do or what we know now, or what we can using innovative tools to overcome those challenges. That's, I think, a goal we need to keep trying to promote that.
Great. And so back to a topic we were on just a few minutes ago, Wendy's asking about, again, this goes back to establishing the rye cover crop in the fall. Do you know of any research or any work that has compared no-till planting or drilling the rye compared to some tillage before the rye, and how that affects the cover crop's performance, evenness of the stand, biomass production? Can you comment on that, or are you aware of any of that research, Yichao?
No, I'm not aware of those research, but I am sure they are available. So maybe we can, after meeting, we can talk about that. We can discuss that in person, or I can ask our more senior researchers here at Rodale.
Okay, right on. Kayla's got a question about costs and returns of these treatments. Are you tracking the different costs of the treatments, and then the different financial returns and the profitability of your four systems?
We haven't done that in this project yet, but Rodale has compared the economics, energy uses of the different systems, organic no-till, organic tillage, compared to conventional system in our long-term farming systems trial. And we've shown that organic tillage systems are leading in the economics, saving cost, as you can probably see easily. Organic tillage system, you have to plow and come back to cultivate, tying weeds and buffalo or other things, multiple passes in a season. So those are extra cost. But with the no-till system, you just roll, crimp, and plant. That's it. Or if needed, you can come back with a high residue cultivator, do another additional path of cultivation underneath the cover crop residues. But essentially, it will save you cost and energy uses compared to the plow and cultivate systems.
Okay, I'm sorting through all these questions here in the chat. We've got a lot of activity here, which is great. Have you tried drilling the soybeans into the rolled rye? I guess maybe that's not exactly what you practice in the experiment, but do you have any comments on drilling soybeans after the rye has been rolled?
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that particular question. My background is in soil science, so I know very little about these engineering and technical stuff. But the PI, the principal investigator of this project, Brian Luck, he's an agriculture engineer at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He knows much more than anybody on this project.
Okay, there's a question about rotation, and if you can comment, Yichao, on the rotation that this soybean study, the portion of the study that you're showing today, and how long of a rotation is that, or short, and how might, a long rotation that has 3 years of alfalfa affect weed dynamics in it as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these fields are we are using in this experiment and here at Rodale are in a 4-year rotation: corn, oats, soybean, and wheat. Corn, oats, soybean, and wheat. So because oats and wheat, they are harvested early, right? They are harvested in July or August. So you have a chance to establish the cover crop very early in late August or early September. Then you will have a good amount of biomass, cover crop biomass in the next season, in the next spring. So that's a chance we do the no-till, the cover crop-based no-till. So in this corn, oats, soybean, wheat 4-year rotation, so we can do 2 times these organic no-till, treatments. After the wheat, we will it will go into corn, right? So after wheat, we will plant a hairy vetch cover crop and terminate that in the spring and plant corn into that. After oats, we will plant cereal rye and then terminate and plant soybean into it. So that's our current standard 4-year rotation here at Rodale. But also, and in these systems, these are organic rotation systems. And we apply compost to these systems every 3 or 4 years to the oats phase, to the oats. And in our farming systems trial, where we have 2 organic systems, the organic legume and organic manure system, as I just introduced. The organic legume system also follows this 4-year rotation, but it does not have any external input of compost. It only relies on leguminous cover crop for fertility. But the organic manure system, it has an 8-year rotation. It has an 8-year rotation. On top of the 4-year rotation, it also has a 3 years alfalfa perennial phase. And it also has composted manure to be added into that system. So the organic manure system in the long-term farming system trial of Rodale Institute represents a typical dairy farm operation where you grow corn silage, and alfalfa to feed the dairy cows, and the manure after composting will be applied to the soils to support the soil fertility. So that's another 4-year rotation in our organic manure system. I did not see much difference in terms of weed pressure in organic legume 4-year rotation and the organic legume 4-year rotation and organic manure 8-year rotation. We don't see much difference in weed pressure.
Okay, great. And sorry, I was going through all these questions, so I might have missed this, Yichao, and I might have missed this in terms of my understanding of Rodale in general. Are you comparing any of these organic practices to conventional no-till, so non-organic no-till? Is there any comparisons of that? I know our Rodale is almost entirely certified organic, but are you comparing to any conventional no-till practices?
Yes. Okay. As I mentioned, these 3 systems, conventional system, organic legume system, 4-year rotation, and organic manure system, 8-year rotation. The trial was started in 1981. But in 2008, to better represent the modern changes of agriculture, we divided these 3 conventional and organic systems into no-till and tillage, to all 3 of them. So now we have 6 systems to compare: conventional no-till using Roundup, complete no-till, and conventional tillage, organic legume no-till, organic legume tillage, organic manure no-till, and organic manure tillage. So 6 systems in total. We are comparing them side by side.
Okay, great. And then would you qualify or classify that the conventional no-till system as a high residue system? Are we maintaining a lot of residue on the field in that one? Okay,
yeah.
Great.
I think that's what we are seeing, in a lot of places. For example, in Pennsylvania, we have about 70% row crop farmers are no-till, supported by chemicals, Roundups. Right? They are conventional no-till. 70% of the farms in row crop farm in Pennsylvania. But in a long-term trial here at Rodale, we did not see the benefit from the conventional no-till. The soil carbon is the lowest among the 6 systems. And so we also see severe soil compaction in the conventional no-till system.
Okay, thanks, Yichao. I think we've exhausted all of the questions here, and we are coming to the end of our hour. So I want to thank Yichao for being with us today. I'm really glad we could get him here, and I'm also glad everybody who was able to join us and participate and be very active in the chat today. Thank you all for that.